Joel and I decided to be the youth pastors, and we self-appointed ourselves. And God just really used that. And then when I was 18, I kind of was a youth director for a small church, and then got called to go into the ministry, and went to school and went to Liberty University, but then started playing football. I found out that I was really good at kicking a football, and so Liberty decided to pay my way through school doing that, and that was kind of fun. And then had an opportunity. I got called in the ministry full-time, but then I had an opportunity to go play professional football. And I'll never forget, I sat down with my youth pastor, and I said, Doug, and we laugh about it now, but I said, it was at a Wendy's, and I said, this is a really serious conversation. I feel God's calling me into the ministry, but the Dallas Cowboys want to give me a contract. What do I do? He looked at me, took a sip of his Coke, and said, go play football, and walked out the door. And I followed him out in the parking lot. I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, how many people get the opportunity to go do that? He goes, go do it. I said, but I feel like God's calling me into ministry. He goes, well, you can be in the ministry and play football too. It's a great way. He says, but if you don't go, you'll never know. And God really used that, because I got to the Cowboys and I was miserable. And God began to just stir at my heart. And when I got released, I went into ministry full time, and then the New York Jets called. And so I went back and did it again. And then God just really just shut that door. But it was something I had to walk through. And I'll never forget, I was actually in Jacksonville, Florida, and I was training to go try out for another team. And I probably had the best workout of my life. And God just spoke to me and said, are you willing to give it all up? And I said, yes. I picked up the balls, put them in a bag, gave them away, and never to train again. And so that's kind of how I got into full-time ministry. And so I started traveling around the country speaking to youth. The first time I ever got to preach, I spoke in front of 4,000 students. That was a little nerve-wracking. I was in Tennessee at a crusade. And God just began to work in my heart. When my wife and I met, I decided to get off the road traveling and just went into full-time youth ministry. And we've been doing that ever since. 25 years ago, we came here to help start a little church called The Crossing. It was Calvary Baptist back then, met at Bloomingdale High School. And then it went to The Crossing. And then 5 years into that, God called us away for about 8 months. We did not like it, came back. During all that time, my wife was working with the pregnancy center, Brandon Pregnancy Center. Now it's called Choices. And she helped develop and put together this abstinent program. And so one day she said, hey, the school, Bloomingdale High School, needs a male speaker. I think it was the auto mechanic shop director. He said, hey, guys in my class are getting girls pregnant. I need someone to come talk to the guys. I'm like, okay. And you got to understand, walking into this, it was not a health class. It was not a PE class, which we were zoned for to go into. So I walked in, and he was really nervous, didn't know how to really introduce me. And he got up and he said, this is the sex guy. Well, that stuck for the last 20 years. So when I walk onto public campus, the coaches and teachers all introduce me, the sex guy. And so my son, who was 6 at the time, we were walking through the mall, and one of my students came up and said, hey, sex guy. And my son looked up to me and said, Dad, you're famous. Don't know that I wanted to be famous for that. But so we've been going around talking about purity and abstinence. You know Paula Sweat, she's one of our speakers. Caleb now is on our board as well, and Paul is the chairman of our board. But we've been in the public schools for the last 20-some years, speaking over 10,000 students. Then this thing called COVID hit, and so kind of lost a little bit of presence. And then I had open heart surgery, and that kind of stopped me from going in the schools, because I can't speak 8 times a day because my voice won't let me anymore. Because of all the damage they did when they went down my throat to do all the surgeries. But God is good, because I just got an email today. The public schools have invited us to come August 3rd to speak to all the coaches of middle school and high schools. And I get to speak during their training session, and we're going to schedule them. So we're going to be very, very busy again this fall. So the Lord's been good, been faithful. But we've been doing this for a long time. Right now, the teens that we have, this is what we love probably the most, because we get to work with teenagers every day. They go out to Boys and Girls YMCA's, rec centers, and churches, and they get to share the message peer-to-peer. And so we've had some of your students come through there, and so we're excited about the opportunity we get to do that. But through all this process, when COVID hit, God just has a way of having a sense of humor. My wife looked at me and said, why don't you go back to school? You've been wanting to do that. I'm like, but I have a learning disability. I have dyslexia and all this other stuff, the alphabet that goes along with it. And when you go to college and you play football, you have really good tutors and help to get you through school. So my best friend graduated summa cum laude. I graduated, thank the Lord, just because I got through. And so she said apply, so I did. And I went back and got my master's. The first class I took, I cried because I don't do grammar very well. And I told my wife, I said, you're going to have to help me. She's really good at it. And she kind of laughed at me and said, figure it out. She's real tough. And so I did. I kind of faked my way through it and found some way to help. But then I found this wonderful thing called Grammarly. Anybody know what I'm talking about? If you don't have it, you need it. It's $138. It's a premium version. If you have the free version, you don't know what you're missing. Come to find out, when you get to graduate school, that's what they want you to have anyway, because that's how they grade their papers. And so I found it, and all of a sudden my grades changed. So right now I am 4 weeks away from going into submitting everything for my doctorate. I have a 3.91 GPA, so I'm very proud of that. And so I will graduate October 14th with my doctorate. So yes, I will require everybody to call me doctor. My wife said, I'm not calling you doctor. I said, you will when you introduce me. And so that's a little bit about who we are. But I'm actually getting my doctorate in this parent program that we're actually doing tonight. So Caleb's going to be helping me afterwards because I have one more project to do. But a couple years ago, I just realized that, we were doing really well reaching teenagers. But as I've watched the culture shift, and especially since COVID has hit, we're seeing this more and more, even in our churches, and especially in the public schools and the private schools that we go to. Some of the private schools actually are, Christian schools are harder to reach than the public schools. I'm trying to figure that one out, but there's some reasons why behind that. But here's what we found as a common denominator. Parents, good or bad. We're finding that parents sometimes can be the problem, where the students used to be the problem. Now it's linked to the parents. If you go to a school, a lot of times the parents are coming and they're complaining about their students and different things there. Because culture has shifted, even in the church, and being a pastor for as long as I have, one of the things I've realized is that if a parent is doing everything right, sometimes the child can rebel, right? And then you got a parent that doesn't do anything right, and then the child exceeds. What's going on? Well, one of the things that I've tried to really kind of hone in on is what can we do to equip parents along with what we're doing to equip students and mirror that together. And so we really, as Impact, have taken on going into churches and saying, okay, let us talk to the students while we talk to the parents. Because we want to give you tools. How many of you have a teenager? Okay? How many of you have a teenager and sometimes you just go, I don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, right? How many of you ever had a teenager do this to you? But why? And you go, because I said so. And they go, but why? Now, if I did that as a child, my dad probably would have smacked me across the room because it was disrespectful. Here's what we've learned. Adolescent teenagers will ask the question why 100 times because they really don't know. So I'm going to make a statement, and this may offend you, and I apologize, but I'm used to working with teenagers, and I'm very sarcastic. Is that okay? Can I just be who I am? Is that all right? Okay. Here's what I know about students. They're very smart. Actually, they're the smartest generation that ever lived, but they're stupid. They're not dumb. They're stupid. And here's why. This part of their brain does not develop until they're about 25, 27 years of age. I have 2 adult children. I'm waiting for the day that this starts to develop completely. And I have one that's married and still doesn't get it. And so my son, who's 21, in college, studying to be a pastor, brilliant, I called him the other day. I said, hey, we need to talk about your finances. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. And so I said, you're eating your paycheck. And I said, it's not fair to Mom and I that we're having to pay these extra bills. So we're going to do a budget. Okay, Dad, yeah, I'll call you on Friday. Did he call? No, because why? He forgot. And so my wife and I have been learning how to deal with adult children because we know teenagers, but adult children we haven't quite figured out yet because we just haven't raised them. And so we had a very good friend of ours say this to us. Here's the phrase that pays. I'm here if you need me. Because they don't want my advice. They don't want my encouragement. My daughter thinks she's very smart. My son's very smart, but Dad is kind of irrelevant right now. And so the other day I called my son to tell him, and we kind of got in a little argument, so I stopped. And so I emailed him. I said, here's what I need by Friday. I need to know this bill, this bill, this bill, this bill. It was amazing because I communicated the way, because he told me one time, he said, I communicate better with text and email than I do with verbal communication. Because this generation doesn't communicate verbally like we did. It's in the phone, it's on the computer, all the things there. And so I emailed him, and I gave him 4 things. It was amazing how quickly I got the information I wanted. And now we're on much better terms, and I'm able to help him. I said, I just need to plan. And he goes, Dad, I don't want to be a burden. I said, it's not a burden. It's just we got to learn to communicate. Because this part of the brain doesn't comprehend like it should. See, I see it, and I can see the results and the problem and the solution. He can't, because it's not fully developed. So if you have a teenager, one of the things you have to understand is they're going to why things to death. And what you have to understand is if you don't have the answer, or you don't want to give the answer, you don't know the answer, is not to say, because I said so, because that will even compound their frustration. The best thing you can ever do is say, I don't know, or, and this is something I learned with my son, I don't know that I can explain it to you. But I'm going to ask that you trust me that what I'm telling you is good for you. He can comprehend that because he knows that I have his best interest at heart. But if I go at it, well, that's common sense. Everybody ought to know that. They may not understand. But when it comes to knowledge and information, they probably are more adept than we've ever been because they can Google it, they can YouTube it, they can do everything. Now they go to school with YouTube, right? My son passed math through YouTube because the teacher told him to YouTube his assignments because the teacher didn't know how to teach the math. So he said, go to this website and you learn. And so he's learned to do that. I'm doing my graduate work. I have talked to my professor 0 times. It's all self-learned. It's done through a portal. Anybody heard of Canvas? Okay, everything's done. They shoot us videos. I don't even look at the videos anymore. I just read what they want because I know what the assignments, and I'm flying through it because I've learned how they like to teach. I've had to learn that they don't care what I know. They care, can I cite it? Can I put it in Grammarly and make sure the grammar's correct? And can I format it in the way that they want me to do it? And because my opinion really doesn't matter unless I can back it up with some kind of site. And so the world that these kids are living in is so fast and so bombarding with technology that if we don't parent and don't lead them and understand some of the cultural things, what's going to happen, the culture is going to influence them. As much as you try to keep them away from it, the culture is still going to bombard them because they're going to have friends, they're going to have their phone, they're going to have some type of technology, and as they get older, they're not going to know how to process things correctly. So what I want to do tonight is I want to give you a couple things that I've learned, some tools and some things that maybe can help you. If you have questions, we'll have to have time for question and answer, but I'm going to kind of give you some information right away. Okay, here we go. Number 1, when you're talking to your students, always be open. You don't always have to tell them everything, but be open. Here's what I see a lot of times parents do is we give information, but we're not open. My children know that they can ask me anything. I may not always give them the answer they want, or I may not always give them an answer that, if it's too personal. And because of what my wife and I do, we share our testimony so they know our story from a very young age. They know that my wife had a pregnancy scare as a junior in high school, and that's why she's passionate about teaching students not to do that. They know that her mom was very compassionate, and because of it, it brought her back to the Lord. They know that she was at a Bible college, and she got convicted because a speaker said, if you've gone farther than you should, you can repent and get right with God. And because of that, she has a very beautiful testimony. They know that I waited, and I played professional football, and that I almost married a girl that I thought, I was in love with, and she wanted me to go further than I wanted to go and I was like, well, maybe I could because I loved her. And so, but they know the redemption story that my wife and I have. And so they know all that. And so from a very young age, they kind of know us. And so we're very open. And so one of the things that we've been able to do with our children is be open about things maybe other family members or parents have not felt comfortable doing because they don't have that openness. So I want to encourage you, always be open as much as you feel comfortable doing, because that makes it real. Because if I tell somebody what to do and I don't have a reason behind it, sometimes they will question that. And not in a bad way, but they may not question in the right way. I don't know how to explain that, but the best way I understand is this, is that if a teenager comes up and asks me, I will be glad to share anything and everything. I'm an open book. Because I want them to know my good and my bad and my ugly. When it came to my kids, I didn't want to be anything different than that. Because they would hear me preach or they'd hear me teach. And so, our family has been very open with that. So you have to do it in the comfortability of your own home. For my wife and I, because of what we do, we are more comfortable with it. Because my son at 6 years old heard people say, the sex guy. He thought sex was kissing, but he heard that. So I had to explain that the best way I could. Well, Dad, why do they call you the sex guy? So I had to explain why that happened, because it was happening quite a bit. Another thing is this, discuss your values. I see this a lot. A lot of times we tell them our values, but discuss it. This is why we as a family believe this. I had a value in my home. If you have a cell phone in our home, you will have Life 360 on it. I don't want anybody to know where I am. Sorry, then I'm not paying it. It's not on my plan. It's a part of who I am. My wife has it. My son has it. My daughter's now moved away and got married. She's not on our plan anymore, so I can't require that. But let me tell you why I put that on there. Because I was raised in my home that my dad said, if you don't have a plan and you're not where you're supposed to be, that's not good. You can't leave the house. So if I told him where I was going to be, who I was going to be with, what I was going to do, I never had a curfew because my curfew was what time I told him I was going to come home. Dad, I'm going to the football game. I'm going with my 7 buddies from church. 3 of them, we're going to ride together. 4 of us, they're going to meet us over at Pizza Hut afterwards. Well, the game that we went to, we sat on another side because our school shared a stadium with another school, and they swapped our sides this year. It was really crazy. So we sat on a side that we weren't comfortable with, and so we won the game in the last 30 seconds, and it was like mayhem. Well, half the people had left and gone to the Pizza Hut where we normally hang out. So when we got there, we couldn't get in, and we were hungry. 4 of my buddies left. 3 of us decided to go to Pizza Inn across town. So in my mind, because this wasn't working, Dad, we're going to the game. Afterwards, we're going to Pizza Hut. I'll be home between 12:30 and 1 o'clock at night. Okay, long as you're home by 1. If anything changes, here's the last thing he said to me, call me. This is before cell phones. I went to Pizza Hut, like I told him, got there. It was crowded, so I left my car, got in another car. We went into town, eat Pizza Inn. I don't know if you've ever heard of Pizza Inn, best pizza ever. Got back to Pizza Hut, hung out, went inside. The manager goes, where you been? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, your dad's been looking for you. You might want to go home. What I didn't count on was a guy who graduated prior to us, a year ahead, came to go back to surprise us all. But because we were on the other sideline, because they changed it, he went to the sideline that we had been on for the last 55,000 years that we were upset about. Because we all went to school with the people in middle school, with the people from that high school, he hung out with them. And afterwards, he went to Pizza Hut. I wasn't there, so he went to my house. My dad sent him back to Pizza Hut, said, did you stay to the end of the game? He goes, no. He goes, I listened on the radio. They won, so they're going to be a little late. So he went back to Pizza Hut. Now my car is sitting in the Pizza Hut parking lot. I'm not there. I've jumped in the car. 4 of my buddies went home. So he went back to my house. My dad started calling the buddies that left, did not know that we left and went to Pizza Hut because they went home. I come rolling back into Pizza Hut. My friend's at my house that I did not even know he was there. And my dad said, you might want to come home. So I get into the driveway, and my dad's like this. He says, where you been? Now, I could have lied to him, but I chose to tell the truth. And he goes, okay. He goes, go enjoy your time with Mike, because tomorrow you're mine. I don't remember much after that. I remember I never did that again. But there's a value. He said, all you had to do is make 1 phone call. Pizza Hut's packed out. We're going to Pizza Inn. Okay, enjoy. Have a good time. But see, I thought because I was at Pizza Hut, I would have never lied. Because my dad would have asked me this question, how was the pizza? Well, I like Pizza Inn better than I do Pizza Hut, and so I wouldn't have been lying. It was really good. See, I had it all figured out. But now Life 360 comes along, so my children, oh, Dad, well, we have to do it. My daughter calls me, Dad, my tire's vibrating. What am I doing? I'm like, it's about ready to blow. Where are you? I don't know. I'm on 75. So I pull up Life 360 and I'm following her. I jump in my car and I program where she's at, and it takes me within 20 feet. My wife is on the other phone. We're three-way calling, talking to her. We'd got her pulled off. The tire had shredded off the rim. We'd now called Geico. They're on their way. Had I not had that, I would have missed her by 20 miles because I would have gone the other way, because where she told me she was, it was not where she was. She thought she knew, but Life 360 knew exactly where she was. So in my house, I value that. My wife, one day her phone died. Couldn't get a hold of her. Well, Life 360 tells me that her phone's out of battery. So I know that my wife, the last thing when she's here, she's headed home. So it's a value that I have. My son's in college. Turn your phone back on. Oh, Dad, I'm sorry. Like, I don't care. So one night he was driving, and I'm like, I called him. I go, why are you in Virginia? You live in North Carolina. Well, Dad, it's only like 40 minutes from where I live. I go, I know, but why? He goes, I just wanted to go for a drive. So the other night I called him, and I said, hey, you're headed to Virginia. He goes, yeah, we're going to a drive-in movie. He's 21. He's fine, doesn't have to ask permission, but it gives me comfort to know where he's at, but also I can kind of check up on him to make sure he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. It's a value, because I still help him with his cell bill. What's your value in your home? Value in your home, where my house was, my dad, we had dinner at 5:30. You weren't late or you didn't eat. So it was a value. Or we called ahead of time. See, when you discuss these values with your children and you allow them in instead of just telling them, this is why we do what we do. So when I explain the story that I was late and wasn't where I was supposed to, my kids get, okay, now I know why Dad wants us to know where we are, because he had that happen as a teenager himself. Because it's a value in my home. Church, not an option in my home. I don't care if you play sports. I play sports at the highest level. Okay, my son was very competitive in soccer, played football, very good, but we never missed church because of a sporting event. We miss sporting events because of church. Now, if it was a major tournament and something, a one-time event, we might go to church a different time or whatever. We were involved in a church, and so couldn't go. So we went to another church just because church is a value. It's something that I value in my home. But today, parents are like, well, they have homework. I'm in graduate school. I got to go home and write a paper tonight. I'll be here. It's a value. Well, you know, they play sports. So they play sports every Sunday? Then find a church that doesn't go meet on Sunday. Find another church that meets in your schedule. They need to be in church. They need to have that value. My son and my daughter go to church, not because Mom and I make them, but it was a value, and that's all they know. So my son, he goes, Dad, it's not right if we're not in church, even as a young child. So now as a college student who's studying to be a pastor, he found a church, and he absolutely loves it. It's not something I'm saying, are you going to church? I mean, he'll text me, hey, Dad, have a great day. I'm at church today. Hope you have a great service. We'll talk about it later. My daughter in Pittsburgh, finding a home church is real important to them. And so, because they just moved up there, and so they're trying to find that place. But it's a value in our home that we have. What's the value that you want them to understand? You've got to be able to express that to them, not just tell them that we do it, okay? Another one is this, monitor your teen activities. I'm sure you do this, but monitor it. If they live in my home, it's public knowledge. You can't, I never wanted a TV in their room. I'll just tell you, if they have a TV in the room, a computer in the room, put it outside, because you can't really monitor it. Get on every social media they have. In our home, if they had social media, we had to be on it. We probably communicated better with their friends than they did. But y'all, they'll think we're weird. Well, they're going to think you're weird about something, so go ahead and do it. Because in today's world, you need to know what's going on. I'll just be honest with you, the technology has changed so fast and so rapid that if we don't know what's going on, we're going to lose this generation faster than ever. We need to be able to use it. I would say you have your preference of what you want to do, but you don't have to avoid it. You just have to monitor it, because it can be used very powerfully. Caleb and I are going to be talking about tonight how we can take this and begin to do video vlogs where I can send it out all over the world. and develop this and hone this into a video, 15-minute segments, because we want to make a difference. Discipline. This one's big. Are you a parent that knows what the discipline is before it happens? I love my dad for this. I never not knew what my dad's punishment was if I crossed the line. So if he told me this was the line and I crossed it, I knew what I was going to suffer. So do you think I crossed it? Very little. I played professional football. Crossing the line, if you were a minute late, it was $100. This was 30-some plus years ago, $100. Now it'd be like $500 to $1,000. 3 minutes late, you get to go home. They have a guy, all he does is write down this stuff. Now they do it on a computer iPad. In college, if you were late, you ran or you didn't go on the weekend trip for the game. With my dad, you didn't come in right at the last minute, you came in before. My dad had a value, 30 minutes early. I was here 45 minutes early tonight because it's a value, but it also was a boundary that we were never late. And so what's the consequence if they cross that boundary? With my mom, I never knew. I never knew when I was in trouble or not in trouble, depending on what mood she was in. Or was she up when I came in late? Because if my dad was on a trip, I would push that because my dad wasn't there. My dad was there, I was never late. I always walked in, except for that one time. I always walked in when I was supposed to. Make sure when you discipline, it's appropriate. Here's something I will share with you. I'll share with you in a minute, probably another thing. But when you do discipline, make sure your child knows what the consequences is prior. How many of you work? Anybody know what the penalty is for being late? Anybody know what the penalty is for running a red light in Hillsborough County? It's $156. Ask my wife. She's done it twice. Here's a big one. Be a role model. Pet peeve. Can I just tell you my pet peeve? It's Friday night. I'm honest. Here's my pet peeve. Because I grew up with this. My mom goes, hope you never start smoking. At 18, I pulled out the packet of cigarettes. I said, sorry, I've been doing it since I've been 12. Where'd you learn to do that? From you. Oh, yeah, remember when you sent me to Aunt Catherine's to work on the tobacco farm? Yeah, they don't really care if 12-year-olds smoke or not and drink because that's part of their lifestyle. Oh, I didn't know all that. I know. Role model. Be their role model. Moms, dress appropriately. And I don't know if you've ever been out to a football game lately, but you can't tell who the moms are and who the teenage daughters are because we call it hoochie in our house. My daughter was 3, and I took her out on a daughter-daddy date, and we went into Longhorn. And these 3 teenagers come in, and probably at one of the schools I spoke because they recognized me. And when I'm not in school, I try not to embarrass them. But my daughter stood up in the booth and went, Daddy! Those girls are hoochie. So we call them hoochie mamas. One of the things I can tell you, my daughter dresses very modestly because her mother modeled it. And so very important. I know we live in Florida. Yoga pants are awesome, I'm sure, but sometimes they're just not the most appropriate time. So teach your child. Dads, we had a daddy rule. If it didn't come in the house, it can't go out of the house, right? So when my daughter went shopping, she had to go through my eyes before she bought it if it was questionable. And then when my son became 12, I just sent him, and he goes, Allie, that makes me feel uncomfortable. Don't buy that. Because guys see it differently than girls. Yes, that dress is cute, but it's too cute. Just be careful of that. So moms, you've got to model that lifestyle. So let me kind of give you a couple of little statistics. Mothers and fathers who practice what they preach and preach what they practice are far more a major influence than any other time in the adolescence. Okay? So if they're heavily involved, they're what they're saying, they're actually doing, and their words match their actions, have a really, really big influence. So if they're saying church is important, they're taking them to church. Yes, we missed a ball game because church is more important than that. we really focus on some of the values, have a really high rate of success. Just 1% of teens age 15 to 17 raised by parents who attach little importance to religion were not highly religious in their mid to late 20s. But you take the opposite, who came to church, who got involved, it's almost like in the 90s. So think about that. Not going to church, only about 1% of the children who are raised that way end up going to church and really having a faith-based lifestyle. But the opposite. Parents need to realize that their teens do things for a reason. Okay? So understand the culture today is really bombarding our children like it's never done before. So you can do one of two things. You can isolate them from it, or you can raise them to understand to be the light in a dark world. As a Christian, I wanted my children to be able to be an influence on people. My son, next door neighbor, Christian, handicapped in a wheelchair. One day I looked out and I hear all these noises and I'm thinking, okay, what is going on? My son's on the back of Christian's wheelchair and they're doing donuts in the backyard. Will didn't know that he was handicapped. Christian would come in and go, Will, let's play. And Will would go run. And Will and him had a blast. They played video games, did things together. Christian came over. But because we didn't teach Will to segregate because Christian was different, we said he's got to be treated just like any neighbor of ours. Will had a compassion. Today he has a very compassion for people with handicaps and whatnot. My daughter, very, very sensitive to young girls that maybe that didn't have a loving father and didn't have that. And so because we raised them to care for people, because my wife and I, we call them strays. The kids at church that parents didn't show up, whatever, they come hang out with us, stay with us, and became our part of our family. We've been doing that for years. We have children all over the world, we say, because we adopted children. We have Josh, who is a pilot for the Air Force, and he calls us every month and goes, hey, just want to let you know. He goes, tell Mom I'm heading out of country. And I go, where are you going? He goes, I can't tell you. I go, I know. And I'll say something. And because I watch the news, I go, so you're going over to da-da-da. He goes, Dad, I can't tell you. I go, do you like hot dogs? He goes, yes. I go, okay, that's all I need to know. And so but he did not have a family. So we brought him into our family. We should have adopted him illegally because it would have been a lot cheaper on taxes. But he's 40-some years old, has a family of his own, and he still calls us Mom and Dad. Alfred, one of the first kids in our youth group, we led him to Christ and became part of our family. So our children don't know anything but to accept those kids who may have not been as fortunate as they are. And so they've been very loving. So make sure that when you're raising your children, that those values and those things that you do, you just don't tell them, but you model it. Because this generation is very visual, and they're stimulated with a lot of things. Like, what do you watch on TV? Do you send them to their room so you don't watch? Or do you watch it right there? What are you doing with your computers or your cell phone? Are you saying, hey, put your cell phone up, but you're on it all the time? So model that. Do you have a rule that when you come to the table, the cell phones are down or away? Whatever. Get a phone box. This is what we use tonight. I don't know if they'll use it tonight, but our students, they'll come with their phones so that we have a phone box. And so our students who volunteer have to put the phones in the phone box while they're on getting their service hours because they're not allowed to use it. And then we give it back. When we go to camps, they don't get to take them with it. It's crazy, but it works because they love it, because they start to communicate and talk. So what do you value and what are those things, okay? Everybody tracking with me? Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple tools here in the next 20, 30 minutes that I found that have been very helpful. There's some of the reasons why things. How many of you know or heard of love languages? Anybody heard that? How many of you know what your child's love language is, or your parents? I see some students. Your parents' love language, okay? What's your child's love language? Oh my gosh. Yeah, you should have, yeah. Okay, so you got one that likes to hug and one that doesn't, and you got one that needs to spend time. Okay, so I'm going to just tell you my family, and because I found this to be the most powerful tool that we can ever teach any parents. If I could only have one lesson to teach, this is the one I would teach. I actually have a school, private school, that they contract me out every year to come once in the fall, once in the spring to teach it to their parents. It's required because they're dealing with inner city parents. And it's amazing because what we see happen. So love languages are real important. And here's what we found. A lot of times, and I do this in the schools, and when I do it in the schools, here's almost every period I do it, I have a student go, can you come talk to my parents? Because it just changes their world. And what really got my attention was I was at Bloomingdale High School, and I was teaching 8 periods a day for 5 days, which is insane. Don't know why I did that, but I did. So on Wednesday, I always do love languages. So I did love languages, 8 periods, and I do it the same level. I do it, first period I do for 8, and I just collapse at the end. What I did not know, there was a set of twins, a young man and a young lady. They were twins. They were there and some other students, but that morning coming to school, this is what they heard. And Caleb, I think it was when you were actually at Bloomingdale this happened. It was in the auditorium, and the student comes running in Thursday morning, Bill! And then all of a sudden, Bill, his brother and sister, we love you. Well, I love you too. Okay. And I'm sitting there drinking my Diet Dr. Pepper, trying to wake up, 7:30 in the morning. They go, you don't understand. Yesterday when we came to school, our parents sat us down at breakfast and said, listen, we're not getting along. Mom and I are fighting all the time. You guys are fighting all the time. So we're going to decide at dinner tonight, one of you is going to go with one parent and the other is going to the other parent, and we're going to separate because we just can't do this anymore. Now imagine going to school hearing that. So they went to school, and he sat in my first period, she sat in my third period, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do here in just a moment. But it said it changed their life. So you know who Paul Harvey is? Anybody? Am I too old to say Paul? Anybody know who Paul Harvey is? So I'm going to tell you the rest of the story in a minute, but let's get through this, okay? If you don't know what your love language is, you tend to love, and unfortunately, you may love out of emptiness or out of your own need. But love language was never designed, and God said, God so what? Loved the world. He didn't say the world should love him. It does say that we should love God with all our heart, all our minds, all our soul. But in that verse, it says what? God so loved. So love is about giving. It's not about taking. But unfortunately, the world that we're living in, and whether they are a believer or not, the world we're living in, we tend to take. So let's take a child who comes from a single home. Mom is working all day. She comes home. She's tired. She's worn out. She's got 3 kids. And there's dirty laundry everywhere, and the dishes are in the sink. What do you think she's going to do? She's going to start yelling, please, somebody do the dishes, and she start going to give commands, right? And because she wants to get things done. You have 5 children. I can't even imagine the laundry that you do. How old are they? You are brave. Oh, God love you, because I got 2, and I'm like, one I could have given away at times. But I can't imagine, do you have chores and lists and things that they have to do? Okay, good. Because, and then when it doesn't happen, especially when you're tired, you're like, I just need it done. Because you have a list. How many of your moms have a list? Okay? And you just want the list done. You don't care how it gets done. And mom would always go, I can't work and do this too. And I would yell at the kids because I'm like, I'm in trouble and I want you to be in trouble with me, kind of thing. And now that my kids are gone, I have no excuse. So when the trash doesn't get taken out, it's me. So I have to do the trash, right? But when it comes to love language, here's what happens. We tend to love out of our own need instead of loving people the way they need to be loved. I grew up in a home that was very sarcastic, very negative, and somewhat verbal abusive, okay? My mom ended up getting Alzheimer's, and I work in an assisted living facility right now, and I was going through some training today, and the person who was training said this, and made a lot of sense. If your mom was not nice before they had Alzheimer's, they're probably not going to be nice after they have Alzheimer's. And so I got that. And so I grew up in that home where my mom pretty much put me down and cut me up all the time. My dad was very sarcastic, so I'm sorry, I'm probably more sarcastic than I should be. But I grew up in a home where I never felt loved. I knew I was loved, but I didn't feel it. Does that make sense? So we have a generation of students that are growing up. They're dealing with all the cultures and all the statistics we just gave. But then we add this factor of this love language that God has embedded in us, that this is how we love and how they need to be loved and how we should be loved. But unfortunately, as parents, sometimes we don't do it well enough, and so then we have this conflict when they become teenagers, because now they're aliens and they're getting on our nerves, and they have a mouth and they want to talk back a little bit and they want the independence, but they're not ready to handle it. The first way people love is what? Through the acts of service. This is the home I grew up in. My mom loved doing projects. We did a project every Saturday morning. One morning we got up, we moved a bush. 6 inches from where it was planted. It was here, it needed to be here. Why, Mom, are we moving the bush? Well, I want it to be in the center of the driveway, and if it's in the center of the driveway, people can see, because I grew it. So I spent 6 hours digging this bush up because I couldn't damage the roots and literally had to move it. My mom could literally grow anything. I can't keep a goldfish alive. But my mom, I've literally seen her walk by, take a plant, prick it off, put it in her pocket, go find a paper towel, wrap it up, stick it, put it in her suitcase, fly back to Virginia, plant it, and become this tree. Okay, she was capable of doing that. So my mom loved to garden and do all this stuff, and so this bush had to be right in the center of the driveway. 6 hours later, I go, oh, this has been horrible. She goes, this has been the most wonderful day of my life. I'm like, woman, what are you smoking? I think it was the bush. I looked around and we had a lot of those bushes, so I think she was smoking it. My wife thinks it's sexy when I clean the toilets. Because if this is your love language, you love when people help you do things. You want to do that project. You want to do those things. And my mom had projects galore. As she got older and I had to take care of her because of Alzheimer's and all the things that she had to go through, if I needed to get her back in track, I'd go take her shopping or do something or buy her a hot dog or do something, because she always needed to be served. But my mom would be very vocal about how much she thought I was an idiot, stupid, da-da-da-da-da. But when I would do these things, she would kind of say, oh, thank you, that's the best. And so when I started teaching this, I started going, if I can do this on my mom, I can really teach students and then eventually parents how to do this and do it well. So my mom came to visit one time, and I learned a phrase. Mom, what can I do for you today? Well, so she came to visit. She's getting ready to leave. I said, Mom, before you leave, is there anything I can do for you? She goes, well, I would like to go to the beach and see the ocean. I said, well, we don't live on an ocean. We live on a bay, but I'd be glad to take you. It was August. We went to Clearwater in August. Not a good thing. Hot, nasty, and I get migraines from the heat. So I took her. My mom does not swim. Clearwater Beach was not a good choice because the beach is so long to the water. So she walked. My kids are now running into the water. They were young, and my wife's trying to chase them, catch them. So my mom walks all the way, sticks her toe in the water, and goes, okay, I'm ready to go. Mom, is there anything? Well, I got to go to the bathroom. I looked, and the bathhouse is probably like a half a mile that way. So I gave my wife the keys. I said, please just pull around. So I took her and got her in, got in the car. Is there anything? Well, I would like to eat some seafood. So we went to Krabby Bill's. I know why they call it Krabby Bill's. It's nothing but fried seafood, which she loves. I hate. I like the raw good stuff. Okay, shrimp and lobster and things like that. She got it. When they gave me the bill, it was $62. I now know why they call it Krabby Bill, because Bill was really crabby by now. Got her in the car, going to take her to the airport. Got her to the airport. She goes, I don't have my ticket. I go, yeah, you do. It's on my phone. Well, how do you do that? I says, Mom, don't worry about it. Just come on, go. So I opened it up, and I did that, right? And so I went over and bought her candy, got her a magazine, found a couple who was going to the same place that my mom was going. Can you please make sure she gets on the plane and goes home? My aunt is on the other side. Took me 6+ hours, probably about $100 to do all this. And right before she got on the plane, she looked at me, she goes, everybody ought to have a son like you. Cost me $100 in 6.5 hours. I got a migraine, got sand in my toes. And but I learned that that's what my mom loved. My dad, on the other hand, he was similar to that. My dad had contracted a lung disease, was dying. because he was doing this, smoking, and then different things, and so he got emphysema. So I went to say goodbye to my dad because we knew he wasn't going to live much longer. And I noticed he was trying to pull down some wallpaper and different things. And I go, Dad, can I do that for you? No, I can do it. I'm like, no. So I said, okay, try it again. Dad, is there anything? Well, and all of how I approached him. So I'd been doing this all my life because I worked with my dad. My dad was a handyman, and so I pulled it down, did what he wanted to, cut the grass. I cut the grass. I have video of me cutting it when I was 3 years old on a tractor. So I've been cutting this yard since I was 3. I was now in my 30s. Okay? He wanted to cut a certain way. What I did not realize is I was cutting it a certain way because he knew he was dying, and he knew people were going to come to the house. And he wanted it cut so it looked a certain way because he knew that Mom could not get it cut before the funeral. It all makes sense, but I'm like, okay. Like, I don't normally cut it that way, but I'll cut it that way. And then everything. And then right before I left, my dad goes, I love you, son. You're the best son ever. I'd never heard my dad tell me he loved me but one other time because I didn't grow up in that home. And what I learned was when I learned to love the way they wanted to be loved or need to be loved, they eventually gave back to me what I needed. It was work. My wife's love language is time. I don't need time. I really don't. So time is going to our favorite restaurant on Davis Island, spending time watching a movie or going on a cruise, letting her read a book while I eat. It's very romantic. And so letting her have the time. Or giving her time. Like today, she's going on a ladies' retreat, and her sister and her are going. And I'm like, well, that means I can go up to Liberty and watch the football game that I've been trying to see if I could go to. And you okay if I go? You don't have to ask. Okay, you don't have to ask. So she's going to get to go spend time doing what she's doing, and I get to go do what I want to do. Because that's my wife's love language, is time. So when my kids came along, I started working on this, and I realized with my daughter, see, because my love language is what? Anybody figure out what mine is already? It's words. Yeah, I need words. My daughter doesn't need words. She needs gifts and she needs time. So I give her something, she'll keep it in a box and she'll do a thing. And so I learned that very early that, it didn't take much to motivate her. My son, he needs hugs and he needs words. My daughter would go to bed. Good night. Night, Allie. Walk by her room. You okay? I'm good, Dad. Reading a book, whatever. Okay. She liked it when we came in and talked to her, but she didn't need it. My son, on the other hand, said, who's tucking us in? You're 8. You can tuck yourself in, but somebody's got to cuddle with me. Go to bed, boy. And so I'd go to bed. He'd be asleep. I'd walk in my room, and my wife likes to let me sleep closest to the door because if anybody tries to break in and try to kill us, I die first. 2 o'clock in the morning. Big door. My son has red hair. Oompa Loompa is coming near me. Gets right up to the bed and goes, Dad! What? Move over. Why? Because I want to cuddle. So my wife instituted cuddle time, which means come down, get your jammies on, come sit there and watch what we're watching, then we go to bed. And so normally I'd go up and get in the bed and fall asleep. About 2 o'clock in the morning, my arm would be asleep, my side, so I'd get up. He's 21. He'll still come in and cuddle in my lap and his mom's lap because that's who he is. But he also loves those words. And so he's playing football at Bloomingdale, and he had a coach that was very verbal abusive, and it got bad. And I had to confront the coach in the school and everything. Finally, we just pulled our son out. But right before we did, I looked at him and I said, Will, I just want you to know something. He goes, yes. I go, I want you to know you're my favorite. More than Allie? Well, if you have a boy and a girl, you can say my favorite son, my favorite daughter. I said, yeah, you're my favorite. And so if I want to motivate him, I have to use those positive words. So when I called him the other day and go, hey, I need this, this, and this, do you think I was being positive? Absolutely not. I need it figures. But when I typed it, hey, Will, this is your pops. Just want to let you know I love you. But could you please get me this by Friday? Thanks. If not, Mom and I can't help you. Love you lots. You're Pops, because he calls me Pops. If I'd have done that verbally, what do you think? Hey, Will, I need this by Friday. Can you get it? Because I tell you what, I'm really needing to know, because I'm trying to do my budget for the week. And Mom and I have got stuff coming up, and I need to know what I can and can't spend. Because we're here to help you. But you see the tone that I would have used? Trying to get the same message across, but how I reached that. So when you're dealing with your children, understand, see, for me, my wife one day came to Bloomingdale while I was speaking, and I had spoken 8 times that day, was in a class, things were good, and my wife is the director of the program, so she was evaluating some things. So we went to lunch, and she goes, that was awesome, but, and all of a sudden I went like this. She goes, what did I do? I go, it's okay. She goes, no, I want to learn. What did I do? I said, well, for 30 plus years, 40 years now, I've been hearing, great job, but. That's all my parents ever said. I always got the negative with the positive, and so I never got the positive. And so I don't handle criticism really well. Matter of fact, I'm terrible at it. I was doing my doctorate work, and I had professors prior to a professor I just had say, oh, best writing I've ever had. This is great. Grammarly's telling me awesome. Then I had a professor. This is terrible. This is not doctor material. Because he's trying to motivate us to get more out of us. And I'm on a website, so I know he's doing it not just to me, but to others. But I told my wife, I said, I don't even want to finish. Well, I just got a new professor, and I just popped my grade up while I was looking at my phone. And so I got a really good grade on my last paper. So, yeah, okay, I'm gonna get a good grade. But he will say, great job, and he's positive. What do you think that does to me when I hear the negative? I don't want to finish. And I'm one class away from finishing. But when I hear the positive, it re-energizes me. So my wife says, great job, but. Well, what she had to say was really good at what I needed to learn. But in that moment, after speaking 8 periods a day, exhausted, tired, pouring out, didn't get paid to be there that day, did it as a volunteer, I couldn't receive it. Why? Because for the 30 plus years I was raised by my parents were always saying, great job, but. Playing football, college, Lord Orion. 3 minutes to go, we're down by 2. Coach sends me in to kick the winning field goal. I'm sitting across the line is my high school friend. He's mouthing off of me. I'm like, bring it on, buddy, because I'm cocky and stuff. And I'm out there, and they call timeout to freeze me, and I'm out there. And I'm like, okay, the wind's blowing a little bit, so I've already figured out because they're home stadium. So the ball snapped, the ball goes, and I kick it a little bit to the right of the goalpost because the wind's going to blow. But my dad and I have been working on me trying to get in the middle of the goalpost because I'm trying to go to the pros, and college uprights are wider than pros. So we were trying to show it on film that I could be accurate in the middle. But the wind was blowing, so I said, I just need to win the game. And so I actually did really well with it. We win the game. People are going nuts. I go to the locker room. My dad comes down with his oxygen, and he's there, and he greets me like he always does. And I'm excited because I won the game. Everybody's high-fiving. My fans are like, okay, yeah. And my dad said, that was awesome. But the ball didn't go in the middle. We got to work on that. Now, he was right because we'd been working on that for weeks. But instead of saying, great job, because when I'm watching the film tomorrow, that would have been a great time to bring that apart because I already knew it didn't go in the middle. But he didn't know why I did that because the wind was blowing so hard, I didn't want to have any chance of not winning the game. I'd much rather win the game to be perfect with the field goal because then technically when they look at it, they're going, oh, did he make it or did he not? But he said that in a moment, and all of a sudden it took every ounce of joy of me winning that game and defeated me to this day. And he will never know that he did that because he didn't understand love languages. See, if I had said that to my daughter would have gone, okay, yeah. Can you buy me something? Can you spend some time with me, Dad? My son would have been crushed just like me. My wife, she can handle the words better than I can. I can't. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't get bothered by words. You understand what I'm saying? But when you understand how your child is loved, You can take culture and you can do all this stuff, and I can motivate someone so quickly by understanding. Go into a restaurant, figure out what their love language is, the waiter or waitresses, you'll get free food or better food. If their love language is words, all you got to do is talk to them. If their love language is service, just kind of put the plates nice and stacked up like they like it, they get it, and they can do more and different things like that. If it's needing gifts, I tell them right up front. My wife and I, we do this kind of as a game. When I figure it out, hey, great service, tip goes up. They're motivated. They're not motivated by that. What's their motivation? If it's time, they want to spend some time doing something. They'll constantly come by and see how you're doing, interrupt your conversation, all the things that are going on. And so we can do this with anybody, but when it comes to our children, this is the one thing in my world. So the rest of the story. Bill, we love you. Love you too. Yeah, my mom and dad told us that we were going to be separated. So when we went home, we got in the car and we realized that we were loving opposite of what we are. I was loving out of my need. He was loving out of his need. And the reason we weren't getting along is because we weren't loving each other the way that we needed to be loved. She goes, my love language is time, his is words. And we were doing it opposite because I was giving him time and he was giving me words and it didn't match. And we went home and realized I'm mom, he's dad. So mom and dad said, we're going to have a meeting. They go, no, we're not. We're hijacking the meeting. Sit down. We're going to teach you what we learned today. 5 years later, I was at a restaurant, and this girl comes up and goes, you don't remember me, do you? I go, look familiar. I go, what school? She goes, Bloomingdale. Oh, yeah. She goes, you remember that story about the boy and girl that dad? I go, yeah. She goes, I'm the girl. She goes, our family's doing awesome because we learned to love each other the way that we needed to be loved. It changed their world. 2 high school students saved their family because they learned something, how to love people. See, if the church would do that. See, if we have someone that can't handle words, we need to be careful how to not to be so sarcastic. I have to work at that because I was raised that way, so it's a part of my culture and nature, but it's no excuse for me to do it. If their love language is acts of service, we need to learn to serve people. We need to serve people anyway as the body of Christ. But when we serve people the way they need to be served, so when mom comes home and she's wiring out and tired, if the kids would know that if they would help her, because she's trying to get to the list that she really has, but she can't because she can't get past the list of the dishes and the laundry and just a few things that she needs to be done so she can get to the real list of doing the things that she needs to do so she can relax and enjoy the evening. And so as the husband or the children, we need to understand that's mom. Well, maybe it's not mom. Maybe mom just needs some encouraging words because she's always working really hard and we're not very encouraging. Or maybe that student, when they're getting a C, instead of fussing and yelling at them, saying, it's okay. Because maybe they only can get a C because they have dyslexia and your family doesn't even know they have dyslexia. And so because they're giving negative words, they stop giving up on school and then they are ready to quit, drop out, and almost flunking out until a teacher comes along and says, hey, I think I know your problem. 10th grade, I've been told I was not going to make it. I was failing. I was not doing well. My parents were mad at me because I couldn't look up the word and spell it. All the stuff, you should be able to do this, and I can't. And so I've been tested since I've been in 2nd grade and couldn't figure out what it was. And I walked into 10th grade, and I had a teacher the week before say, drop out of school, go join the Air Force, Army, just get out of school, go get a job, do something because you're not going to make it. Wasn't trying to be mean, was just being honest, but that broke my heart because I was like, okay, I'm a failure. So I walked into 10th grade, and they said, you're going to have to do a term paper, and you're going to have to do all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't even know how to spell because I'm reading on the 4th grade level because I've been pushed through school all through my life. And all of a sudden, Miss Hicks walks in and goes, hey, Bill, can I test you? I probably cussed her out at the time because I wasn't a believer. And we walked down to the library. She pulls out a book and had these bright colors. It looked like a coloring book. She goes, can you just look at this for a little bit? Oh, yeah. I said, Miss Hicks, I've been tested all my life, and nobody can figure it out. They just say I'm hyper and I don't want to learn and I'm just stupid, okay? She goes, well, I don't think so. I think I know what's going on, so let me figure this out. Look at this for a minute. Then she closes the book, and then she gives me a book and makes me read something. What'd you do? I go, I can't even tell you what I read because I can't even sound out the words. She goes, I understand. She goes, and then she opens another book and had black squiggly lines all over it, hands me a box of crayons and said, can you color the picture I just showed you a few minutes ago? I said, the one that you showed me that has all the colors and stuff? She goes, yeah. Could you just color it in and see if you get close? So it took me about 20 minutes, so I colored it in. When I done, she took the picture she showed me. The picture I drew is identical. And she went like most doctors do. She goes, you ever had a doctor do that? Last time they did that, said you had to have open heart surgery. And so she went, She goes, that's what I thought. I go, what do you mean? She goes, well, just a second. She did something. She goes, actually, you have a photographic memory. She goes, it's semi-photographic, but you do have a photographic memory. She goes, you don't remember anything you read. I go, no. She goes, because you can't read very well, so you're not going to remember it. And when you hear it, do you remember? I go, well, if I really think it matters, but most of the time I don't. She goes, yeah. She goes, you are a visual learner only. It's very rare, but you only learn through visual. She goes, can you remember things? I said, yes, ma'am. I said, I could have told you that before I walked through the door. That's why I can imitate any commercial voices and sound and anything, and I can remember what you wore. I'll remember you had a blue shirt and a green shirt. I won't remember your name, but I'll remember that for the rest of life, and I'll remember you because you've been nodding the whole time, and I'll remember that you had on a blue dress, and I'll remember that, okay? I'll remember it 20 years from now. I won't remember your name because I didn't hear it. But I'll remember what I saw. I could tell you almost identical what this picture is if I take a picture of my brain. And she goes, you can do that. She goes, so we're going to have to learn totally different. She goes, if you give me the next 3 years, 3.5 periods every day, I will get you back where you not only graduate from high school, but you'll go into college. I said, what periods do I get out of? She did. I think I forged my family signature. I didn't even ask. I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I went in 3 periods a day, sometimes 4. And I learned how to read by words through pictures. I cannot spell my name, but I can spell Wednesday because I see a wed, a nest, and a day. I will never forget that. I'll remember house, how it's spelled, because I can remember looking at the picture house because I read the picture before I read the word, and so now I know how to spell house. Tuesday. I can't say Tuesday because I say Tuesday. Because I grew up in Virginia, we have a slang. So I was spelling it with a CH. Don't ever tell a child to look up something because they probably don't know how. My mom goes, well, sound it out. Well, if you don't know how it sounds, you can't sound it out. Well, look it up. If you don't know what it starts with, you can't look it up. So don't tell a child with dyslexia to do that because we don't know how to do it. As an adult, I don't know how to do it, but I know how to push Grammarly. And Grammarly tells me everything I need to know. I have really good content, but I had terrible structure. My spelling was horrible. But Grammarly, they should learn that. I can't. To this day, I couldn't tell you what all the stuff in grammar is, but I can know that Grammarly knows what it is, and I know how to write, and I know it tells me that it's not a good structure sentence, so it changes it for me, and I go, I trust you. Because you know what my professors do? They put it in Grammarly, and they trust it. So I just got a 96 on 100 paper that I thought I was going to get a little lower because I didn't know if I did something. I probably just left something off, and he's trying to, because we're getting closer. So now my GPA is intact because I now have the confidence not only do my master's in 8 months, which is a 3-year program. I've done my doctorate in 14 months, which is a 7-year program. So I've gotten my degree in about 2.5 years straight through, master's to doctorate, because I now have confidence. Because I've had professors all along go, that's good. Oh, nice writing. But I don't even know I'm doing it well, but Grammarly is helping me have that confidence. See how that worked? Because it's giving me the positive reinforcement. So I now have that. And so those positive words. But then I get a professor who says, well, I don't really like the writing. You're da-da-da-da. And it's more style than it is anything. So it makes me want to quit. But my wife goes, hang in there. You can do this. Talking to another gentleman, I'm struggling too. Let's just kind of get through. And so I need those positive reinforcement. If we don't learn to do this with our children, we're going to lose them. Because the world is bombarding them with every false and inaccurate statement we can possibly get. Youth ministry, student ministries, children, it is so different than it was 20, 30 years ago. It's so different than it was 5 years ago. And you can try to isolate them from culture and all the things that you do. But if you don't raise them up to understand the importance of their relationship with Jesus Christ and who they are and love them the way they need to be loved and teach them to love others the way they need to be loved, here's what's going to happen. We're going to have a generation that grows up that kind of just exists. I've never seen it before where people don't know how to work. They want everything given to them. They want, and they can come from good homes, but the problem is that we are dealing with a culture that's so counter to what God wants us to do. And then the home, here's what we're doing. We're bashing things instead of teaching them to love God with all of their heart and then love people. Lost people. I work with lost people every single day. I have people who are 90 years of age that are very unchurched and unlost, that will die. Today we sent out a gentleman. He had, his dementia's gotten so bad, and then he got COVID. He will not come back. He will pass away this weekend. I will get the report on Monday that he didn't make it, or Tuesday, because he's that bad. If he doesn't know Jesus, he's going to be lost for eternity, right? Well, I can say, well, I don't agree with him. I don't like his values. I don't anything. And so what we've got to learn is that God has called us to love people. And not just love them because, oh, well, God told us. Love them who they are. See, I was different. I was a kid that had a lot of talent and a lot of ability, but it was never tapped into. And come to find out, my IQ is really high because I'm on that spectrum that you have that. But I was told I was dumb and couldn't do it most of my life into my adulthood until I got a teacher go, no, you are probably very, very smart. We just have to teach you differently. Because I wasn't raised on the computer or the cell phone. I was raised with a pen and a piece of paper that couldn't write very well. I can't even write. I write notes down. I can't even read it back because I can't spell. So I have to type everything. So I've had to relearn. That doesn't make me less of a person, right? And so we have these children that are being raised up, and we've got to understand how important it is to love them the way God has created them. But as parents, here's what we do. We're worn out, we're tired, we're exhausted, and we love out of our own needs, not out of the needs of what they need. 5 children, you got 5 different love languages going on. That's crazy, you know? And some of them may have the same, but you're going to have to love this one this way. You're going to have to do this, and that's work. I mean, you've got to be exhausted. But that's what God's called us to do, is that I can't love Allie the same way I love Will. I can't love Angie the same way I do. And so Angie needs my time. Allie needs my gifts. That important. Will needs that encouraging word that I type out because I can think about what I'm saying instead of being blunt and to the point. Even though that's my love languages, I have to work at it. You're the number one influence. And unfortunately, you can be an influence that's not good. And you can think that you're good. But you got to understand that God is the creator of life. And he's created them, and it may be different than what you think they are. My son, I had to give up the dream that he was going to play professional football because he was better physically than I ever was. But mentally, he didn't have it. And when he said, Dad, I don't want to play sports anymore, I had to die to a dream. And the way I responded was very important. What do you want to do? He goes, I want to be a pastor. Okay, I can get behind that. I'll support that. Will, why did you overdraw your account? No, I don't let him overdraw his account, but I'm teaching him how to budget his money because he's not very good at it. He knows he's not very good at it, but he doesn't want to admit that he's not very good at it. So I can yell and scream and holler at him, or I can say, hey, I need these things, bud, because Mom and I want to help you. I know you're short because I've done the math. You don't make enough money, and so we're going to help you, but this is how we need to be able to help you. Can you help me do this? Or I can say, I need it by Friday, and if you don't have it by Friday, I'm cutting you off. Does that make sense? So with my mom, when I showed her the acts of service, eventually I got back, everybody ought to have a son like you. The last word that my dad said to me was, I love you, and I'm proud of you. He went into the hospital, put a tube down his throat. 20 days later, he passed away. I went into the nursing home to see my mom. They'd called me, and I saw her the week before, and they called me and said, she's not eating, and she's not talking. She's sleeping a lot, so we think it's time. So I walked in, and she was sitting at a table. I can remember what she was wearing, what she was eating, sitting there, and I go, Mom, do you know who I am? She goes, well, you're Bill. First time she said that in about a year, because she thought I was my dad. She looked at me and she goes, I love you. A week later, she passed away. See, God has a way of restoring that, negative and all the things there, because the last thing my dad ever said to me was, I love you and I'm proud of you. And the last thing my mom ever said to me is, I love you. What do you think I will hang on to till the day I die? That didn't cancel some of the hurt and pain, but it's canceled all the negative, because I learned to serve them in their weakest moments without any hope that they would give back. When you do that, what you're teaching your children, they'll love their spouses and their brothers and sisters. They'll love so much stronger and so much harder. Learn their love language. Teach them regardless. If they talk nasty to you and ugly to you, understand, yeah, that's not right, but at the same time, love them in the way that God created them, because that's what's going to ultimately change what's going on in our culture. When I do this in the schools, and I'll close with this, I can watch kids who live an alternative lifestyle. I can watch kids who have been hurt and broken. Tears are running down their face because they're like, I just wish somebody would love me like that. Instead of condemning someone because they live an alternate lifestyle, love them. We have kids who, yes, they're living a transgender world, but what if they walk into our church? Oh, they can't come to our church because they're alternative. Then they're never going to be loved. I can tell you that I don't agree with them, but at the same time, I love them. And when you love them, you know what it does? It changes the world. It may not change who they are. God's called us to love people. And if we teach our children to love the unlovable, because I promise you, one day they're going to be unlovable to somebody else. Because they're going to take somebody off, they're not going to do something right, a boss, different things like that. But teach them to love, and teach them to love people the way God created them. They're lost until they know Christ, right? Our children need to understand how to love the world. And so when they come to church, this ought to be a safe place so kids can just be who they are. But it also ought to be a safe place that people can walk in and be transformed. I was a teenager that walked in, would cuss you out, spit you upside down the other. And because my minister of music, the lady that was my minister of music's wife was my choir director, and he was my choir director at church. She was my choir director at school. Loved me and invited me to church and kept inviting me, kept loving me. I came to know Christ because they accepted me, because I was a hellion that walked in that would cuss you out upside down the other, and I was not a good teenager. Mrs. Hicks looked at me and said, I don't care what anybody else says. You're smart. Mr. Cox, my choir director, said, Bill, I love you. Yes, you're different, but you're unique. Put his arm around me, became a surrogate father. Doug Ranlett, my youth pastor, who mentored me and trained me to be a pastor and a mentor to others. And I can go on and on and on, but they began to love me for who I was. And it caused me to know that I was valued and special in God's eyes. I wasn't getting it from mom and dad. And so we as parents have got to love our kids the way God wants us to. So go home tonight and find out what their love language is. Well, how do I do that? Give them a hug. If they go like this, it's not touch. If they crawl up in your lap, it is. If you look up and say, that's a great job, and don't say anything else after that, and they go, it's words. If it's acts of service, help them do a project, whatever. Most children, that's more of an adult thing. I don't see too many kids with it. I see a lot of adults with it. I don't know what's going on with that. But then what if it's a gift? My daughter had like a box of things. I'd take her a Rissy cup. She'd keep the wrapper. Give my son a Rissy cup, he'd eat it along with the wrapper, right? If it's time, spend a little time with them. You'll figure it out. And then love them regardless. But the problem is that we want to be loved too, right? So at this point in time in your life, you have to love them with no return. And eventually they'll get it, and they'll love you back. And my son, who sent me a text the other day after I sent the nice little email, hey, Pops, I love you. Thanks. Or a mom that says, everybody ought to have a son like you. Or a dad on his last word says, proud of you, I love you. God, we love you and thank you. Pray that, Lord, that we just can love these teenagers the way God wants us to love them. And we ask this now in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, I'm going to give a real quick plea and then we're out of here. Impact, October 6th is our celebration. We need some help. We need to get church people to our banquet because the school district just emailed me today and they've asked us to come speak in front of every middle school and every high school coach. I'll get to do that on August the 3rd. So pray for me, first of all, for that because I get to do our program in front of them for about an hour. And then we get to book them to go in and speak on high-risk behavior. Prior to COVID, we were speaking to 10,000 students. Now that they brought the middle school in, we can speak up to 20,000. So that's a lot. So pray for that. Second thing is we need volunteers who can go speak 2 days a year, okay? We only get to go in 2 times like school, but we need people to stand up. Yes, you speak probably 6 or 7 times. We'll train you to do all that. So if that's something you love to do, if you're a former teacher or you have good communication skills, Caleb can help you with that as well. The third thing is this. We need help financially. Because we're back in the schools. Prior to COVID, we were able to just kind of limp along financially. We can't do that anymore. We have a need right now. We need a van. We actually need 2 vans. We're borrowing vans right now, and it's very hard because we transport these kids during the summer. So we're going to do a fundraiser push to get a van. But we also need to do our yearly budget. So if you'd like to become a monthly supporter, Caleb's one of our board members. We'd love to do that, talk to you. But the biggest thing is we'd love for you to come see our program, what it's all about on October 6th at the Regent. And Caleb, and we're talking, we're going to have some things going on. Some of the people from the church are going to help us here put the program on. But it's a free meal and come. It is we do ask at the end. So a table host is this. You just host a table and get 6, 7 other people to sit around with you. And then we do the rest. And the meal's really good. We have a former pastor that owned a restaurant and he does our catering. And we do not do the rubber chicken. We do roast beef. And so it's a man's meal. So if you want to know more, Caleb or Paula, they'll be talking to you. But thank you guys for letting us come. God bless. Oh, I'm giving it back to you, aren't I? Get all my stuff out of the way.
Good. All right, well, thank you all for coming. I just touched bases with the kids. They're all finished back there as well. Talk to them about what they learned and experienced tonight as well. And hopefully, was this helpful? Was this beneficial? Yeah? All right, good. Well, that's what we like to hear and see, and I'm sure we'll do some more stuff like this in the future. So otherwise, have a great evening. I leave tomorrow for vacation, so I won't see you Sunday, but there will still be youth and normal services. And otherwise, have a great night. Thank you.